History is often taught as a sequence of treaties, battles, and the rise and fall of empires, but Alexandre Dumas saw it differently. To him, history was a collection of human passions, the greed that topples a dynasty, the jealousy that fuels a massacre, and the lies that allow a man to steal an entire life. In his work Celebrated Crimes, Dumas moves away from the swashbuckling adventures of his more famous musketeers to explore something darker and more grounded in the shadows of the past. He presents us with a series of historical vignettes, ranging from the Renaissance to the Napoleonic era, showing how the most significant shifts in human history were often driven by individual acts of depravity, deception, and the pursuit of power. The journey begins in the late 15th century, during a time when the line between sacred authority and worldly greed was almost non-existent. Dumas focuses on the Borgia family, specifically the so-called diabolical trinity, Pope Alexander VI, his son Caesar, and his daughter Lucrezia. This isn't just a story of a corrupt family, but a study of how religious institutions can be weaponized to build a personal empire. We see Alexandre Dumas, once a man named Rodrigo Borgia, use his immense wealth and strategic bribery to secure the papacy. His election wasn't a matter of divine mandate, but a transaction. Once in power, the Borgias turned Europe into a personal chessboard. Caesar Borgia emerges as the family's ruthless enforcer, a man whose efficiency in consolidating territorial control was matched only by his capacity for violence. He moved through the Italian states like a storm, using assassination and strategic marriages to clear his path. Meanwhile, Lucrezia was used as a political pawn, her hand in marriage traded back and forth to secure alliances or cement power. Dumas paints a picture of a family that operated with a chilling, coordinated logic, where even marriage and religion were merely tools for survival and expansion. Yet, for all their calculated control, the Borgias' downfall was as sudden and violent as their rise, undone by the very same web of political shifts and sudden deaths that they had helped create. As the narrative moves forward, the scale of violence shifts from the calculated maneuvers of a single family to the chaotic, sectarian bloodlust of the French wars of religion. This is a much darker chapter in the book. Dumas describes the terrifying cycle of violence where religious fervor becomes a pretext for massacres. In these years, the distinction between soldier and civilian, or saint and sinner, evaporated. The book highlights how religious zealotry often masked simple political vengeance, leading to atrocities that targeted the most vulnerable, including women and children. One of the most striking and harrowing accounts in this section is the case of Urbain Grandier, a priest in Loudun. Grandier was a man of intellect and pride, a celebrated orator who found himself at the center of a massive, orchestrated conspiracy. A group of Ursuline nuns, driven by repressed desires and manipulated by local officials with a grudge, claimed to be possessed by demons. They engaged in elaborate, public displays of demonic possession, accusing Grandier of using witchcraft to enchant them. Despite clear evidence that the exorcisms were fraudulent and that the linguistic details of the alleged possessions were impossible, the judicial and religious machinery of France was weaponized against him. The legal system didn't seek truth. It sought a scapegoat to satisfy the fervor of the crowd and the vengeance of the powerful. Grandier's end was horrific, as he was burned at the stake, a victim of a system where the mask of religious virtue was used to facilitate a state-sanctioned murder. The focus then shifts away from Europe to the Ottoman Empire, where Dumas introduces us to Ali Pasha of Janina. If the Borgias were masters of political maneuvering, Ali Pasha was a master of pure, unadulterated terror. He was a Machiavellian tyrant who carved out a private empire within the Ottoman Empire, using both traditional warfare and more modern, terrifying methods like the use of explosive powder to maintain his grip on power. His reign was a relentless cycle of betrayal. He was a man who would murder his own family members and rivals to secure his position, yet he lived in constant fear of the shifting political tides of the Ottoman Divan. His story illustrates a specific kind of power, one that is absolute in the short term, but fundamentally unstable because it is built entirely on fear rather than legitimacy. As the book progresses, the nature of crime changes from the grand scale of politics and war to the more intimate, unsettling realm of identity and social perception. Dumas explores the idea that identity is often a performance, something that can be stolen or mimicked if the audience is willing to believe the lie. This is most clearly seen in the case of Martin Guerre. In this historical mystery, an impostor successfully assumed the identity of a man named Martin Guerre, living as him, working his land, and even entering into a marriage, all because the community around him accepted the role he played. It is a profound look at how much of our self is actually just a collection of social recognitions. If everyone around you treats you as a certain person, for all intents and purposes, you become that person. Dumas also touches upon the scandalous affairs of the French nobility, where the law often seemed irrelevant. In these high society circles, crimes were frequently erased not by innocence, but by the sheer weight of political influence. A crime committed by a man with the right patron was a non-event, while a crime committed by a man without one could be a death sentence. This highlights a recurring theme in the book. The law is often a tool used by the powerful against the weak, while the powerful themselves exist in a realm where the law simply does not apply. The final movement of the book brings us to the end of the Napoleonic era, focusing on the figure of Joachim Murat, the former king of Naples. Through Murat, Dumas explores the transience of power. Murat, once a king, finds himself reduced to a man contemplating exile or suicide in the wake of Napoleon's downfall. His story serves as a quiet, melancholy coda to the grander, more violent crimes discussed earlier. It reminds the listener that the high-stakes games played by emperors and popes ultimately lead to a state of profound isolation and instability. When we step back from these individual stories, several major themes emerge that tie the entire collection together. The first is the intersection of religious piety and political corruption. Throughout the book, Dumas shows how the mask of virtue is one of the most effective tools for a criminal. Whether it is a pope using the church to build a dynasty, or a group of nuns using demonic possession to settle a local grudge, the appearance of holiness is frequently used to hide the most sordid human impulses. Another recurring idea is the concept of divine retribution, or at least a sense of historical consequence. Dumas seems to suggest that while those who commit crimes might escape earthly justice, like the conspirators who orchestrated the death of Urbain Grandier, they are eventually caught by the unpredictable movements of fate or the inevitable collapse of the systems they have corrupted. There is a sense that violence, particularly when it is used to bypass the natural order, creates a self-sustaining loop of chaos. Every act of political or religious aggression triggers a retaliatory strike, creating a cycle that eventually consumes the aggressor. This brings us to the idea of identity as a performance. In a world where power is maintained through reputation and social standing, the ability to manipulate how others see you is perhaps the most potent weapon of all. From the impostor Martin Guerre to the various disguises and political personas used by the Borgias and the Ottoman rulers, Dumas suggests that much of what we consider truth in history is actually a carefully constructed narrative, often maintained by those with the power to enforce it. Ultimately, Celebrative Crimes is not just a collection of stories about bad people doing bad things. It is an exploration of the mechanics of power and the fragility of the social contracts we rely on to keep order. Dumas shows us that history is not just a dry list of dates and treaties, but a messy, violent, and deeply human process driven by passion, deception, and the relentless pursuit of control. He invites us to look past the grand narratives of progress and see the individual acts of will, the crimes, that actually shape the world we inhabit. Through these stories, we see that the line between the great movements of history and the smallest, most personal depravities is often much thinner than we would like to believe.